Welcome. This is For Better and Worth,
the podcast where we don't believe you have to sacrifice your relationship while you build your net worth.
We are your hosts.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Ericka Young, and we're so glad you joined us today.
All right, y'all, come on. Let's get into it. Welcome back, you all.
Yes, we are excited to be here and even more excited to talk about this topic because sometimes I think we can paint a rosy picture and that is absolutely not today.
Well, I don't know if it's about painting rosy pictures. I think it's just about being real with people.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, people can look at the outside and think, oh, man, everything is great. And, they don't see all the corresponding inputs that it took to be great.
Yeah.
A lot of times people only see outcomes. But we're going to try and keep it real with you all today. And we're going to just talk about some of those rough marital years.
Yeah. Specifically, lots of people talk about that 7-year itch. Like, ooh, I kind of want to get something else out of this than what I have right now. And no, we didn't have that. I didn't have that. And
No, I didn't have that.
It was more like the marital twitch in year 10. Year 10 was like
the 10-year twitch.
Yes. I was, anyway, I feel like that crazy lady in like psycho movies or who's, twitching her shoulder, moving her head like, oh my gosh, if one more time I'm about to lose it up in here. That is definitely the year 10 for us. I feel like that's when I just was looking at you sideways and, feeling like I had to watch my own back.
That was an interesting time. And, as people listen and hear this, I'm sure they can relate, because relationships are imperfect and they take work. And that's the thing that I always tell people, they take work. And I've had people ask, like, well, what is it? What's the advice you would give? And I tell them all the time, it sounds cliche of what I'm going to say, and it's always communication. But like when we go back and we think about those rough marital years, man, year 10 and 11, that was tough because we had little kids. We had a 9 and a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
So we had a fourth grader and a kindergartner, and your boy decided to go back to grad school.
Yeah, and you know what? That was something that you had been planning since we got married, moved to Arizona. You were looking to do it immediately, and it didn't happen immediately. And so, I'm in support of that, and that's all good. I think you don't ever really know what it's going to take out of you when you decide to support your partner or your spouse in whatever endeavor. It could be grad school, it could be a new business, it could be a demanding job, it could be, even just a household project where it just takes a lot out of them. And, obviously I want to support you and help you, reach your goals and dreams. And we can say that, and then in the moment we have to make sure that when it's rough, we're still committed,
Right.
And that was a big goal for you. What about grad school was so intriguing?
Well, I've always felt like, I worked really hard to get through undergrad. I worked full time, went to school full time, and kind of paid my dues. But I always felt like I wanted to go to business school because my undergrad degree wasn't in business, and I was doing more work in the business, community and sector through my corporate employment. And it was a benefit my company provided, and so I wanted to, this is just a little side note for people, take advantage of all the benefits that your employer provides, because no matter what happens, they can't take the degrees back.
Yeah.
And my employer had a 100% reimbursement, program. And I was like, well, hold on, it was at a time in my career where I work in an industry where they were, experiencing layoffs. I had gone through leadership development programs at that time, but there weren't any leadership opportunities. And so for me, I think you have to always be looking to continue to grow and develop.
Yeah.
And because there weren't any real leadership opportunities, even though I completed, the leadership training and the leadership development, I felt like, in the interim, I needed to do something to continue to increase my brand, learn. And so, grad school, it just made sense for me at that point.
I'm curious. I don't remember if in your previous jobs to that one, if they had higher education reimbursement. Was that the first company that actually offered that to you?
No, I think all of them had some level of,
Even at Tech?
yeah, I think all of them had some level of reimbursement, but it wasn't to the degree of this organization. It was 100% reimbursement. So I was like, look, I would be remiss if I didn't take advantage of it. And
Yeah.
it's something I wanted to do. And, I learned a lot. I still employ those things that I've learned those years from grad school and, the relationships I've had and I built with people. I still have those connections and, so on and so forth. And I have, an affinity for the university and all of that. So I felt like it was good. But, I think before we even go further into the grad school piece of it, that was like, you have layers. That was one of the layers, but foundationally, I think we were at a point where, like I mentioned, we had two little kids, and you had, transitioned, a few years prior from corporate America into your own business ownership. So now we've got, we got out of debt. You started your own business, and then we had two little kids.
Yeah. And my business wasn't making a whole bunch of money. Like at that point, I had not replaced my engineering salary. And while we absolutely were able to make it work, we were not at a place where we were saving a bunch of money. And we were not at a place where, there were liberties that we could take. So, like, the things that I think about specifically are while you're gone, someone watching the kids, like I'm building a business and I still have to keep them. I was trying to save money and not have the little one in childcare. And, we didn't have somebody cleaning the house and, we couldn't dine out a whole bunch. Like there were a lot of financial limitations in order to make the new way that we were living work. And while grad school was free, there was still that component of, that trip was still an out-of-pocket cost. And so your grad school trip was like 10 days away and about $3,000 at the time. And so, there were a lot of...
That's crazy. You remember how much it cost.
I do.
I don't
Listen,
even remember.
I remember all of that, okay? I remember all of that. And I feel like, again, in the heat of the moment, like when you're making these decisions, like we can be in support and still there's pressure. There's still, things that you have to work through, or there's things that you still have to think about, or you have to, like you said in the beginning, communicate about, because it was a lot that we were both carrying. You were focused on work and grad school, and I was focused on building a business and the kiddos and making the money work. And it was quite a bit. And I, was barely over 30. Like it, you know what I mean? It's like we were young still and we were trying to figure it all out. And there were just a lot of balls in the air. And so that was a lot. And I think the for me, one of the biggest things was the time apart and finding time to then communicate about how all of these pieces work together. Because you'd work and then there were days where you'd be gone until 10, 11 o'clock because school was not around the corner when you met in person, right? It was solidly 30, 40 minutes away drive just to get to your classes. And so there was just a lot at play. And I think, it's stressful. It really, good things can be stressful.
It's funny as I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm sure as people are hearing this conversation, one, we had got out of debt. And I know for a lot of people, that's the goal. So it's like, yeah, we out of debt. Boom, freedom.
Right.
But then we went and bought a bigger house with a bigger mortgage. And like we got free, but then we were like, let's go get this bigger house.
Yeah.
And then we said, okay, now we're free. Let's go shift, some of our careers because you started a business, I started in a different career, which I got pay raises and increases, and it was a good move. But it was like we were ambitious.
Yeah.
And as we're sitting here talking, that's the thing I'm thinking about. It's like, man, we were pretty ambitious because we were so focused on getting out of debt, which as people listen, it's important to know. You got to have these goals. You got to work towards it, but it's a process.
Yeah.
And so we got out of debt, and then we were, like I said, being really ambitious, pursuing all these other things. But when you think about all those layers, I was like, man, in retrospect, we were, as we say, we were doing the most.
Yeah, we were doing the most. And the term I like to use is we didn't let any grass grow up underneath our feet, right? Like we was always moving and shaking. Something was always happening.
We like, boom, we out of debt. Okay, we on to the next thing.
Yeah.
What's up next?
And I honestly think that that's a really valid point, and something to highlight is that getting out of debt is just the start. It is the minimum you need to do so that you are freed up to do the other things. If we were in debt, I wouldn't have been able to start the business. If we were in debt, it would have not made a whole lot of sense to try and go to grad school, right? Like there's a lot of pieces here that I definitely would not have been able to leave my career as an engineer. And so it frees you up. And so it's just the start. And I think people feel like once they've reached debt freedom, that like it's the holy grail or something. And it's like, no. What's next?
There's work that occurs after that, because
Yeah.
even getting out of debt is like, it's almost like foundation.
Yeah.
You set that, okay, foundationally here, boom, things are in order, we're out of debt. Now, how do we build upon this foundation? And that's where we were, because now we have freed income up. And, we've shared stories about, mistakes we've made with real estate and, the lies about marriage. But, I think it's really, we were flexing muscles and beginning to grow. And when you're not using those muscles, they just, they're there, but they're not developed. And so we really started flexing all these other muscles that we were developing in our relationship. And so year 10, it all came to a head where it's like, man, we're doing a lot, because we got 2 little girls that, we love and adore, and they need attention. And I think we had this crazy dog at that time.
Let's not bring Spencer into this, okay?
That's for a whole nother episode.
Totally, complete. Maybe that's about 2 or 3 episodes. Honestly.
Right, these crazy dogs that have been in our lives.
Anyway, we gonna get there. Don't you worry. That's coming.
But we had our little babies, and we were trying to spend time and grow them up, and give them experiences that were slightly different than ours growing up. And honestly, I felt like going to grad school. One, I had got a new job a few years before, and it was really, things were going in the right direction. I had success there, and I got into the leadership development, and and then grad school was just the next progression. So from a husband father perspective, I saw myself really trying to work to provide, increase to my family, because now I'm building upon that foundation of debt freedom and trying to create, legacy and increase my abilities and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So what made that season hard for you?
Ooh, I think, it's a lot of inherent pressure, and this is what's interesting. I think a lot of men want to be viewed as providers, and they want to provide and make provision. But in that, I was like, okay, so I got a full-time job that I'm trying to work and, do well at. And now I've decided, well, before that, I got a wife and I've got 2 kids that require, things of me and that I want to provide for. And then I decided to go to grad school in an accelerated MBA program.
Right, because how long did it take you?
It took 18 months, but it was like 18 continuous months. I had classes once a week, but they were like 6-hour long classes because we had 2 classes at a time. And so I would go to work, and before I would come home, I would go to the library. I would read cases and, do homework, or sometimes I would meet with groups, after work or on the weekend. And so I was taking time away from my family. So it was, I think what made it rough was like all the pressure that was on me, pressure to perform at work, pressure to, do what's required to spend time with my kids and to spend time with you, pressure to perform, in class, and study. And because I had a goal that I wanted to have a certain GPA. And so it's like, all this pressure, they say pressure makes diamonds, but I was like, boy, in the process, it's like, it didn't really feel good. And, and then there are times where, you wanted help or you wanted something. And if I wasn't there or available, then I had to deal, kind of with that. And so I think it's all of those things, together that really made it pressure for me. But when you think back to that time frame and you think about what was rough for you, what was it about those years that you would say was rough for you?
I definitely feel like there were imbalances that we had to embrace. And I had a hard time doing that. So, all of the things that needed to get done at home that I could not, really expect of you because you weren't there, right? So if you were home, sure, I could lean on that if I wanted to. But the other part of it is that you needed rest, right? And so, our one of our challenges has been the division of responsibility at home, right? Like that is
A
always,
division of labor.
yes. And so when that part was out of balance, because let's just be clear, I wasn't called to be an at-home mom. um, I always have been called, and I know this to be true, that to make money and to provide in the workplace and out in industry. And I feel like I never wanted to be seen as someone who was only at home, and that's where my gifts were used. And I wanted to know that there was some balance there. And during that season, I had to let go of it a little bit. And that was hard. That was actually very hard for me. Um, I think that was also, part of why, you can get resentful, right? It's like, okay, I want to help them. But behind the scenes, I don't want to do all the stuff that I got to do in order to be the help that is
Yeah.
needed. And that was hard. That was really hard.
Yeah, relationships are so interesting. When you just sit back and you think about it, sometimes you're like, man, everybody wants to be in a relationship, for the most part, I think. There's some people. We saw a comedian last night and he was like, look, I want to be single.
Oh, he
I
was
was
very
like,
proud.
yeah, I was like, well, I think that's the exception and not the norm. But and he still wanted to have relationships with women. But he didn't want to be in a relationship. So,
Exactly.
but everybody wants to be, in some level of relationship. And relationships, people, are work.
Hmm.
Let me spell it for you all who didn't hear me. WORK exclamation point. It is work.
In all caps, bold, and italicized.
Right, right. Because here we are, we out of debt, we trying to level up, and but somebody sometimes has to make or be willing to make sacrifices for the other.
Yeah.
And I will always go back to, one of our pastors a long time ago said, marriage is about giving up your right to be right
Hmm.
and really embracing the other person and doing what you do for them in the hope and expectation that they will reciprocate. But that's not always like in the moment you like, look, I'm not feeling this.
Yeah.
I need help. I don't want to do all of this stuff. I don't want to be by myself, or I don't want to be, feeling like you're making the ultimate sacrifice when somebody else isn't doing what you perceive to be the same level of sacrifice. So
And to be clear, you also had to sacrifice time with family, right? You were the one who didn't get to be around, right? When we were doing things and being a part of that kind of stuff. So that was a sacrifice in and of itself. and you sacrifice sleep, you sacrifice energy, right? And I think the time apart, aside from what had to happen at home and with the kids, that's also a sacrifice with our relationship and not being able to really take the necessary time for date nights consistently, because I don't really feel that we were real consistent with that. I don't feel like we leaned on our family that we had out in Arizona a whole lot during that season for date nights specifically. Like, we leaned on them for other stuff. Um and so I think that time with one another, time with the family, and the division of labor at home was a heavy lift in a way, during that time for me. And I feel like, you know, that's figuring out how to navigate that for yourself was always a continuous process,
So,
like
so,
daily.
so we talked about, like, why it was rough, or the things that made it rough was having little kids, career changes. We were still trying to build money. We didn't have a whole lot of money, and the time apart. But what was one thing that you felt we did that helped us successfully navigate through that season?
I'll be very honest and say that we prioritized our relationship with God and like our attendance at church and the support systems we had around us. Um, I think that consistency was very helpful, and it was grounding, right? And so that's always something that was super impactful, is to know that we're going to get like that holy deposit on Sunday. We
Right.
were
The
going to
Lord, the Lord came through for
listen. I
us.
needed Jesus. I should have had probably some wine, during that time too. But yeah, like that consistency, I think, has really been the foundation of everything. In our honestly in our whole relationship. But I feel like that was a time where we really needed him. I do think that looking back, it would have been great to have counsel. We just didn't have a whole lot of time.
When I think about how we were able to navigate that season, I think that was the season, if I remember correctly, where we started scheduling like lunches and time together. Like, I would sit down and say, "Okay, here's my schedule. Let me look at your schedule," and we would schedule like, "Okay, we're gonna do lunch this day, or we're gonna, have coffee this day." And that's when we first started doing that, because I was ripping and running and I was on the go. It was like, no, I got to be intentional about how we spend time together. And we started putting it on my calendar, and I would not let anything bump those times. And so, even like, we had a fourth grade and a kindergartner. So that was good because they were both out of the house, during the day. And so we were able to have lunches together. We were able to catch coffees together. And I think, what I would want someone to take from this is that even though you can have years that are rough, it's all about how you navigate. And we started to communicate, and we were intentional. But then it leads me to really my next question. What do you wish you knew then that you know now that would have helped us better navigate?
There were two things. I honestly wish that we had spoken to someone who had been through it in a way, in the season of life that we were in, because we jumped in head first. We were like, oh yeah, let's go. I'm excited for you, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, oh crap, what have we done? This is the paint is falling off the walls. Like, I'm about to, keeping a knife next to the the nightstand. Like,
Wow, you hear that, guys? Just check in on the brother. Make sure I report safe.
but no. The truth, the real deal is resentment builds. It's like, I want this for you, but you not here, and I got all this stuff you want me to hold down. And so I wish someone would have said, "Here's what to expect." And let's talk through it. I didn't at the time know anyone who was going through that. And so I felt like we were in this little bubble by
Yeah.
ourselves, experiencing that alone. And then the other thing that I wish I knew, I mean, because we always knew, like, I was always looking forward to the end of it, right? But the other thing that I wish I knew was that counseling is fine. Like, even if we weren't able to do that together, it would have been nice to have talked to somebody about how I was feeling so that I didn't have, that buildup of resentment and frustration or annoyance with just the season. Like, not
Yeah.
not necessarily always with you, because I couldn't blame you for not being there, but it was just all the things that would pile up, and it's like, what do I do with all that? And
Yeah.
I didn't have tools.
It's neither right or wrong. It's just, going through it. But that's why we joke now and say, you got an MBA, you got a honorary MBA right along with
Listen,
you.
for real, okay? Because I got an MBA with you. I may not have went to the classes, but I learned some stuff,
Right, right.
okay?
And I've applied a lot of my business knowledge to your business through consultancy, which I don't invoice you for. So
Praise the Lord. Thank you. Thank you for that, sir. And you're welcome for all of the benefits of me
right,
having been in
right,
business too.
right. But I would say the thing that I know now that I wish, I knew then is, everybody talks about the love languages. And we were having a conversation about this the other day. And I've learned over these, 20 plus 25 years, your love language. And what's interesting about love languages is that we often try and show love to people in a way that is our language. And it's not your love language. And so it doesn't land the same way because we're like, well, I'm doing these great things that you should appreciate, but it's not the way that you want to be appreciated because that's not the language that you speak. And so, knowing now, if I could have gone back and said, okay, Ericka wants, quality time or acts of service or, words of affirmation or whatever it was, and if I had just focused on that, I feel like you would have felt differently in that moment.
Hmm.
Because if I had given you, the acts of service when I was available, like, okay, I know I'm not here, with work, I'm gone during the day, and then I got class and I'm studying. But here, let me do this because this is really what you want.
Hmm.
Versus me getting back and saying, okay, well, let me do what I think is the right thing.
Yeah. And I think the other part of that too is it goes the other way as well. You needed to know that I appreciated all the work you were putting in to advance your career and to be um, the type of husband and father that took care of his family. And in the heat of resentment, that vision is not at the forefront of my mind, right? Like
Right.
it's like, yeah, you're out here killing it and busting it and working hard and all that. And all I could say to you when you get home is, dang, where you been? You know what I mean?
Take
Like,
these babies. Get these kids.
right. And it's hard to see the big picture, right? And so in that moment, that's all that it was. And then it's also like, because our money situation was not in a place where we had freedom, to dine out a lot or to, even, have a vacation. Like, we had to save for that trip, you know what I mean? So that you can go. And I will say that trip was hilarious. Like, looking back on it, it was hilarious because so much about that was more, that
Okay,
was
now which trip?
to Chile and Argentina
Oh,
at the
okay, okay,
end of your
okay.
grad school
I
program.
think it was awesome.
Of course. See, that's why it was funny. This is why it was funny.
I was like, what trip? That trip was
You don't even
phenomenal.
you don't even remember, dude. You called me, and the words that came out of your mouth, I was like, we have been 18 months in with this, and these are the words that come out of your mouth.
Like, I'm never coming back.
I was like, this fool, I done held this house down. And this fool talk
We
about,
moving.
well, no. You started with, I ain't coming back. And I said, this fool. And then you said, we moving. And then pack your bags. Meet me down here. I'm like, this
It was
dude.
awesome. Santiago was awesome.
And so I'm like, you better bring your black butt home. Cause you were
Está
gone.
muy necesito tu práctico tu español.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you had too much fun. And it was right after the holiday and into the new year. And I cannot believe this dude's gone for 10 days, having the time of his life after he done left me with these kids for 18 months.
This dude is down in Santiago, Buenos Aires.
Man, I had enough of you at that point. I was like, I'm so glad this thing is done.
That
I'm
was almost like the cherry on
It
top.
was. It was like, oh, he out here living it up. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
It's so funny just to think about it now. Like we can laugh now because one, it was so long ago, but it's still like fresh because I'm
Yeah.
getting this fresh energy from you right
Yes.
now.
Right, right.
But is there anything you would have done differently at that time?
Relaxed. You know what I mean? Like just relaxed, honestly, and just let some stuff go. Everything doesn't have to be in order all the time, perfect. I was and not that that's what I was striving for, but frankly, peanut butter and jelly is a meal. Okay, right? I didn't have to do all the cooking all the time. I if I were creative, I could have figured out how to make sure that the house stayed clean without me stressing myself out, right? Or leaned into family members. There's several things I would have done
Yeah.
differently, but in order to cope, survive, and ultimately thrive versus feeling like I'm crawling to the finish line at the end of that time. And it really, in the vast scheme of things, it wasn't a long time, but it felt like an eternity in the moment. It absolutely felt like a decade, and it was really only 18 months.
Here's what's crazy is those were the rough years 10 and 11, and we had a beautiful home. We were living in Arizona, and it was beautiful all the time. We had two beautiful kids. We made it, 10 years, and the rough part was me going back to grad school.
Yeah.
So it's like people still like, man, those not no real challenges.
You're right. You're right. And that's fair. This is honestly, it was champagne problems. I will readily
Yeah.
admit that.
But there's still problems nonetheless.
Yeah.
And no matter what someone is going through who's listening, your problem is real.
Yeah.
Because it's your problem.
That's
and the
right.
way you view it is validated because it's the way you view it and the way you feel.
Yeah.
And the thing that I would say that I would have done differently, I would have took a step back and I would have looked at what would have been involved.
Mm-hmm.
Because we say count the cost. I don't think I counted the total cost. I was just like, oh man, they gonna pay. Oh, I could do this. Boom, and I just started in motion.
And that's what you do a lot of the times with things is you're like, I'm going after this no matter what's in the way, I'm going for it.
Right, because I'm a high drive, high
Yeah.
ambition, and I, have this high achievement, IQ, and I'm just like, I can do this.
Yeah.
But that's if I went back, I would have stepped back and said, okay, let me think this through step by step. Yeah, you can do this. You can be driven and ambitious, but who is this going to impact? Secondarily, it impacts me primarily because I have to do the work. But secondarily, how is this going to impact you? How is this going to impact the kids? How will this impact, all the factors in life? And that's the one thing I probably would have done a little bit more is giving it a little more insight, a little more thought, and just been a little more intentional about that. I probably still would have done it, but
Yeah.
I think just the approach could have been a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe that those years have helped us moving forward because we are able to communicate. I do, count the cost more and think about it before I just jump into things. And so I feel like, we say it was the 7-year twitch, but I mean the 10-year
10-year
twitch, but that really helped us over these last, 15 years or so because we have been able to navigate the kids and I still have a very busy schedule and we know how to get things on the calendar so we can connect and have date night to keep things fresh with us. And so I think though it was rough, it really did help us move forward. So, what would you say? How do you make it worth it?
Well, I think the degree is always worth it. Now, I think you also, to make it worth it, have to be clear on how you're going to receive support from your spouse as you're going after your goals and other people, because we can't do this by ourselves. I think the bottom line is when you're trying to go after something and be aggressive and it's going to take some time and it might shake up some stuff in your relationship or in your family life, the way you make it worth it is know that you can't do it alone. And so all of the support that you need, lean into all of it, because that's vital. It's a lifeline.
Yeah, and I would say you make it worth it. I think ambition is good. Complacency in my mind, that can be a bad thing because it becomes like status quo. And I think ambition is good, but with that, the way you make it worth it is count the total cost. Think about the impact not only to yourself and the benefit you'll receive, but think about the benefit to others as well as the challenges that you're going to have and the challenges others will have. And if you do that, I think you make it worth it by knowing what is going to be required. And then you can do some of the things that you talked about. You can have a more effective and productive plan to go and accomplish whatever it is that you're looking to accomplish. So
Yeah.
I think that's how you make it worth it. So
Yeah.
I feel like it was worth it. I feel like we have come out ahead, and we got 2 MBAs.
Thank you for the respect over here. I need some spec on that time. That is for sure.
I'm gonna go up on a degree upstairs. I'm gonna put a little tape. I'm gonna tape your name on there.
Yes. You know what? I would love that, honey. But you know what? No matter what the itch or the twitch is in your relationship, just know that one, seasons change. It doesn't always have to be that way. We have to not just look on the bright side. I don't think that that doesn't involve the work, or it doesn't speak to the work that is involved to make sure that you're having a healthy relationship. But I think that communicating and leaning into all of the support around you is really important, no matter what it is that you're looking to do. So you can get through the itch and the twitch. Let's go. And just know that it's for a moment in time, not forever.
All right, people. Until next time,
Yes.
Chris and Ericka, we're out. Thank you for spending some of your time with us today.
We appreciate all your support. So be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to this podcast.
You can find us on Instagram at For Better and Worth.
And sign up for our email on forbetterandworth.com.
Till next time, we're out of here.